I just took out this wall and opened up the back of my shop. Thought maybe I'll put a mini split back here. I looked it up. For a 12,000 BTU mini split, the average cost is between $3,000 and $4,900. Well, I ain't got that kind of money. My goal today is going to be to, one, get a quality unit. I don't want some cheap something that's going to break down on me or something that's inefficient, going to cost me more in the long run. So it's going to be to get a good quality unit that, including all the tools to install, is going to be less than half of what the cheapest estimate would be to have the same size unit installed. So I picked this particular unit because it's a 12,000 BTU, which is the proper size for my space. Talking about cost, well, you got to run electricity to these. Now, I got the 220 unit, and the reason I got the 220 unit is if you look at a 220, it's splitting the power between two wires instead of one. And so your amperage is going to be about half, which means that you can run a lot smaller gauge of a wire. And we're going to go over that about how to properly gauge your wire and breakers. And you may not realize that, but depending on how far you're running your wires, that could be a significant savings in cost in the amount that you're going to spend for the wire. Plus, the 110 and the 220 units are basically the same price. Another thing, this has Wi-Fi control in it. My other ones don't, so I don't have to have this on since it's in my shop. If I so happen to take off work early one day, I can hit the button on my phone, have this thing turned on, and be cooling the shop down before I get here so that I can actually get some work done in the afternoon. This also has a heat pump in it. So now I don't have to have a heater in the winter. Now, I am in Florida, and I don't think heat pumps really work well below 40 degrees, but that's the same thing I've got in my house as a heat pump. And so here in Florida, you know, having that heat pump will be more than enough to keep the chill out of the shop here. And I guess the next thing to do is actually start putting this thing in. The smaller box is the inside unit, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up first. It's going to have your instructions in it and your wires, the mounting brackets for that inside unit. So let's go ahead and get that inside unit opened, and we'll get started with that. But then I also will open up the box for the outdoor unit because the pipes that connect are going to be inside that box, and you need both of them. Now, I just kind of break the box open here, and that way I can leave the AC in the styrofoam and don't have to worry about anything getting damaged while I'm kind of moving it around, getting everything hooked up. Now, the mounting bracket is right here attached to the unit. So you just remove this one screw out of the center, and that's just for packing purposes. That screw doesn't go back in. Release the little tabs, and then you slide the bracket out, and that goes on the wall. Now that we have the bracket, it is supposed to be 6 inches from the ceiling, so I'm going to measure down 6 inches, and then I am going to find my studs and go ahead and install this bracket and make sure that I hit a couple of studs, even though it's not real heavy, so it doesn't take a lot to hold it up. But I have found in the past with these mini splits, you also want to put a screw down here towards the bottom, just because that will help it stick close to the wall. So now we need to put a hole for our pipes to go out to the outside. And now I screwed this up because I had the unit sitting upside down on my workbench, and I measured over from the edge of that bracket, and it's about 4 inches over, and 2 inches up is where the pipe's going to come through at. Now you can route that pipe to come out the sides inside the room and go and turn and go wherever you need it to go, or you can have it go right out the back of the unit. And I chose to have mine go out the back of the unit where you couldn't see the pipes. Now, if I had drilled this hole on the other side, it would have went straight through. But I, again, screwed up. I could have edited it out, but this is what happens. So I actually drilled my hole on the wrong side, but with this unit, there's enough slack in the pipe that you can bend it and have it come out either side inside the unit also. So, no harm, no foul. I just had to move that pipe around, and so that it would come out on the left side instead of the right. All right, so I just peeled the plastic back a little bit so I can open this bottom access cover to get into where the wiring is. Now, the system comes with 2 wires. Make sure you get the wire bundle that has 4 wires in it. That's the one that goes from the outside unit to the inside unit, because there is no power or nothing that you hook up to this inside unit. You just have this one wire, and that's the wire that's coming from the outside unit. It's carrying everything you need in it. So you stick the wire in from the back, you pull it to the front. In the instructions has a very clear diagram of how to connect those wires. Just connect them the way that the diagram has, and then be sure to put your little retainer clip here, and that way the wire doesn't get yanked back out. And that's all it is to wiring the inside unit. It's 4 wires, they all have terminals on them. Couldn't be any easier. All right, so you're gonna go ahead and pop these 2 little caps off, and then once you pop the caps off, you'll hear some air coming out because these lines are pressurized so nothing gets in them during shipping. And then you're going to connect the tubing that's in the other package onto here. Now I use the blue Nylock. It's a refrigerant gasket maker. Link will be down in the description. It's really cheap, and it's going to help make sure that you don't get a leak in the future. And you don't have to put this on the threads. You don't want to get it in the center of the pipe, but where the little fitting is tapered at an angle and the flare on the pipe, you want to put it right there on that little angle part, because that's what's going to make your airtight seal. And you don't have to get it carried away with it. Just take a little bit, kind of go right around on that tapered edge, and that's all it is to it. And now they do have special wrenches that you can torque these to the specification, but what you want to do in my case is I tighten them up snug, and then just give them about a quarter turn, just to make them snug and good and tight. But you don't want to over tighten them, because if you over tighten them, you can deform that flange and make it also leak. So if you're not for sure, just go ahead and get your little torque wrenches, and then you won't go wrong. But really, I have never torqued any of these lines, and I've never had one leak before. Now there's a little piece of insulation in the package, so I go ahead and I'll put that insulation right over where this joint is to make sure that my pipe is completely insulated. Now looking back here at the video, I can see right where I made my next mistake at, is I went ahead and I took this drain line, and you can see right here where I thought I had set it to where this was going to twist and go straight out the wall. As you see, I had to move the pipe over. Instead of just turning it to come straight out the back, I had to go across inside the unit and then turn so that it would, go out where I drilled that hole, since I drilled the hole on the opposite side, which, depending on your setup, you may have to do it on that side. Well, I had went ahead, and in the instructions it said to go ahead and put this, this is a UV tape, and to go ahead and tape it all up. I've always done this after the fact, and I will always do it after the fact again in the future, instead of going ahead and taping this up now like it said in the instructions, because right here I can see where the drain line, which it actually did not say to put the drain line in with the hoses, so that's on me. But when I was sticking this through the wall, I was fighting with it, and you'll see all the fighting I did was because that drain line was keeping it from sliding into the hole and sitting flush. So had I not done this, would not have had those issues. So if it was me, I would just wait and wrap once you get the pipes all the way through the wall, and start on the outside, and then work your way back up to the inside. All right, it does say to have 2 people to do this step, but I don't have 2 people. It's just me out here in my shop. So that's why I did not completely wrap all this pipe in with the UV tape. I wrapped enough that was going to get through the wall, which again I would not do. But I went ahead, stuck my pipe through the wall here, and wanting to be careful not to rip the insulation all up, but then at the same time kind of working the little unit up there. This inside unit's not very heavy, so it's actually pretty easy. And again, when I was putting this in, if I had not have put in that drain line with the bundle, this would have fit right in the hole and everything would have worked out. But because I had all that attached together, it just didn't want to sit flush. Well, I ended up having to unwrap the UV tape up there to get that hose to pull out to the right spot. And, I fought with it, and this was one of the hardest parts that I had. And, I thought I fought with this forever, but going back and looking at the video, this only took me about 15 minutes. Now that the inside unit is installed, it was time to install the outside unit. I'd got these little brackets, and when I was looking at the instructions had said, I needed more space than what these little brackets would give me. So I just took a couple of 4x4s, some pressure treated boards I had there, and mounted those on the wall. I made sure that they were level so that my brackets were level side to side. And then I brought up and set the outside unit on it, making sure that I had my proper clearance between the wall. Now I have installed several of these, and I usually don't get that concerned with the spacing as long as you have a foot or so back there, and have never really had any issues. But since I was filming this, I wanted to make sure I did everything correctly and make sure I had the proper spacing there. So then there's just 4 bolts that bolts the unit down. You can set it on the ground, but I like to have my unit at least 6 foot, or a little over 6 foot, because I'm 6 foot tall. And that way, if I'm cutting grass around the building, you're looking down while you're driving the lawnmower, or if I'm walking around. I have some ladder racks and stuff on the side of the building over here, because this is in the back against the property line, so I never really come around this side that often. But when I do, I'm usually grabbing a ladder or something. I don't want to hit my head. That's why I try to mount these up nice and high. So I set it up on top of here, drop a couple of the bolts through and put some nuts on them so I know it can't fall. And then I go ahead and get my level and verify that it was level side to side. And then this bracket, even though there's no adjustment whatsoever on the bracket, it had the unit kind of sitting down, and there is a drip pan in the bottom of this unit that water drains out of. So I didn't want that to be holding water. It's made to drain. So what I ended up doing is just put a couple of washers on the front side, and that was enough to bring the unit level so that I would get my proper drainage. Okay, so you got this little bottom access cover, and this is where the tubing from the inside comes. So we're going to go ahead and connect that real quick. So here I would normally go ahead and cut this tubing off and flare it, but this is metric tubing, and I was not confident. I've never done the metric tubing, and so I didn't know if my flare tool would work with it properly. The tubing comes pre-flared with your fittings on both ends. So I just left it like it was, used their flare fittings, and just tucked the extra, did a nice large sweeping loop around behind it. And you're going to want to make sure that you do not kink it, so you can't make a real sharp bend, or the pipe then has to be repaired. But as long as you make a nice sweep and bend by it, it has enough Freon in the unit that can fill this entire length of pipe. So if you want, you can just do like I did here and not have to worry about flaring. You don't have to worry about getting the tubes connected to the wrong fitting, because they are 2 different sizes, so they can only be connected one way. Also, whenever you get your tubing, you want to make sure that it's lined up straight, and that's where people get leaks. They get this tubing and they have it all cockeyed. So if you noticed in the inside when I hooked up the tubing on the other end, and here I'm going to bend this nice radial bends, but I'm going to make it to where I'm able to screw the flange nut all the way up tight, snug, and so that flange is on that knife edge with my fingers. And then I just use the wrench there to kind of snug it up, because if you have it crooked, it's going to make it hard to tighten up. Well, yeah, you can get the wrench on it and force it to come up in there, but then because it's in a bind, that's where you end up having leaks along the line. So go ahead, take a few seconds if you need to, and get that tubing routed to where it's going to come straight in, and that you're able to screw that little flange nut on with your fingers all the way up nice and tight. And once again, I used a nylock so that I would make sure that in the future that helps. Some of these units, I've heard from AC guys that after like a year or so, all the Freon leaks out of them. And one of the reasons that is just over the heat and the cold, if they didn't have a real good seal, it will, start leaking after a while. With that nylock, that gasket maker in there, it gives you a little extra protection. And with that, I've never had one leak using that stuff. This is the difference between the Mr. Cool systems. Their lines have a little sort of valve in them so that they can hold a vacuum from the factory until they're connected, and you don't have to do this step. Well, this is very simple. You connect your blue line to the bottom of the bottom valve there. There's a little cap. You just remove that, and you run that blue line down to your manifold, and then you run your manifold to your vacuum pump. So I'm going to put a link in for the one I use. You can use a little bit cheaper one, but this one has separate valves for each of them, and it also has separate valves for the refrigerant line. So if you do decide to charge your car and stuff, this whole system will work for automobiles also. So once you turn your vacuum pump on, you're going to see it drop as soon as you open the valve up to the blue line, and so now that is pulling the vacuum. So you don't have to worry about opening nothing on the AC itself. That line is going to pull the vacuum, and it's going to go down to 29 psi, let it run for at least 15 minutes. The longer the better. And then I'm going to shut off the valve going to my vacuum pump, turn my vacuum pump off, let it sit for another at least half hour or so, and make sure that I do not lose my vacuum. And if so, I know it's good to go at that point. While my vacuum pump is running, I'm going to start wiring up the power to the outside unit and the wire from the inside unit to the outside unit. First thing you're going to do is remove this cover. I'm going to go ahead and knock out both of these knockouts and put in some wire retainers to be sure and hold my wires in nice and secure. I came back and I rewrapped all of the insulation pipes with the UV tape. And you want to make sure to put this UV tape on it, because if not, that insulation is going to break down within like a year or so. It just doesn't last with the UV. So this, protects that. And I went ahead and I wrapped the entire thing, that, all of the insulation. I brought over the drain line with the bundle. I did put a separate drain line to come down. You'll see that. But I tried to keep everything nice and neat as I could. And just remember, anytime when you bring something out the wall or you're hooking into something, always make sure that it drops down a little bit so that any water, when the rain comes, will go down to the lowest spot. If you have it up higher and it going down in the lowest spot as the entry point, water will get inside of it. So just make sure that anytime you're running any of this pipe through the wall, that you come out and you have a little bit of a drop, and then you can come back up, but you always want to have that little drip loop in the bottom. And the kit also comes with the nice little flange that you can put in the hole, and it has this little clay-like substance that you can stuff in there to help make a watertight seal. I have done these in the past, and about a year later, I've noticed some of that clay has shrank down here in this Florida heat. So just, be aware of that. I don't know if this one is going to be the same, but I have had that done in the past. So just, the first year, come back after the summer and make sure that you don't have any leaks. If so, just squirt your little caulk up in there and you'll be good to go. All right, so this is the panel, and it comes with a wire for your power, and you got L1, L2, and it is a black and a white wire. Now, I do not like connecting a white wire knowing that it's hot. So normally you would wrap a white wire, if you were going to make it a hot wire, in 6 inches of either red or black tape towards the end. So even though it doesn't say it in the book, I went ahead and I wrapped some red tape around the white wire, and then I connected that on my L1 like it said in the book, and then I connected the black to the L2. Now this was the only thing to me wasn't clear in the instructions. It may be perfectly clear to you, but there is a wiring schematic on the inside of this cover. I did not see in the manual where the wiring from the inside unit to the outside unit for this bundle of wires. But basically just take the colors of the wires above the terminal block and match them up with the wires in your bundle coming from the inside unit. And they should match. You got the blue, the brown, and the black, and then you have your ground that's going to be, the green is always a chassis ground, and then there's a little green screw to attach that to. And, it's actually really simple if you don't overthink it. However, I do think that that would have been nice if they had just had like a drawing of this little terminal block with both rows of wires connected, so there would be no doubt. Now then, we just go ahead and put the cover back where it came from. Make sure that you didn't lose your little screws. And it is a nice and secure fitting. I really like the way that everything fits in here nice and tight, and has the retainers to hold the wires so you don't have to worry about anything getting pulled loose. All right, so I'm not an electrician, so I'm not giving any kind of electrical advice, and I'm not saying this is what I did anywhere in the world, but electrical codes, there is kind of a standard, but then they also have nuances that are regional. So things may be different in your area, but kind of general, any outside air handler is going to need a disconnect. And that's a code in almost any place in the United States. So I went ahead and stuck in this little disconnect box here. And it's very simple. We just have two wires that are coming in from our breaker box, and then a ground. And so there's two lugs that our two hot wires are going to go to, and then there's a ground block. Connect those up, and because I wanted it to be nice and simple, I ran my conduit down, attached my box to the conduit, and then attached the box to the side of the building, and that way everything fit nice and neat. Then I took the wire that came with the AC system that has your two hot wires that are going to the outside unit and your ground, and connected those. And so now we have a disconnect, and we are going to be, in code in almost every place in the United States. Now, there may be some little nuances, and I'm sure people let me know in the description if I get something wrong or if it's different in their area. But by doing it this way, it's going to work. And if somebody else comes out and has to work on the system besides you, if it's kind of done the standard way, then that way nobody's going to get hurt accidentally grabbing a hot wire that's supposed to have been a neutral or something like that. I went ahead and tucked the drain line down into this piece of conduit, and then attached the conduit nice and tight to the blocks up here. And that way my drain is 1, secure, 2, nice and neat, and 3, it is away from the building, so I don't have to worry about the wood on the side of the building rotting, and it's just nice and neat. So it's something that you could do. You could have the water dripping from up here, but I would prefer it not. As you can see, I still have the vacuum on my manifold here. So what I'm going to do is take the top cap here off. I'm going to open the valve up just enough to relieve the vacuum and bring it up to maybe 5 psi. Then I'm going to remove my manifold off of here, put the cap on good and tight, and then once I have that cap back on, I'm going to slowly open both of the valves. Now I still got to remove the cap off the bottom valve there, and then just stick an Allen wrench inside of here and go ahead and open them all the way up, and that way the system will now be charged with Freon, and we are ready to go inside and get this thing turned on. All right, back inside, we're going to go ahead and wrap the end of this 14 gauge wire with some red tape. That's going to signify that we are running power on this wire. So I used a 14 gauge wire because I'm using a 15 amp breaker. Old school rule of thumb is you can subtract 30% off of the size of the breaker, and that's the max amps you want to run on there. So for a 15 amp breaker, you want to run no more than about 10 amps. And this unit is 9 amps, so that's the perfect sizing. And with 14 gauge wire, it's going to be probably less than half the cost of 12 gauge wire. All right, so I kicked the breaker on. I just heard a beep on the unit, no smokes, nothing like that going on. So I pulled the plastic off, went ahead and turned the system on. I took a temperature reading here with my temperature gun to see where I'm starting at. And something that I really like about this system here is with this remote, the little thing here on the bottom, that the air deflector, you can adjust that as to far as, is it going to go from top to bottom? Is it going to go halfway up? So I'm going to end up putting my miter saw station right here, and I don't want that cold air blowing right on me. So I can, instead of having this go all the way down to the bottom, I can have it come straight out and then up to the top to blow the air out above me. Fantastic option. And this little thing, it's got tons of options. It's just a all around really good AC unit, and is going to be a great benefit. I'm really glad that I got this installed. All right, so I just dropped the temperature on the thermostat 2 degrees to make sure the compressor's kicked in. Now let's see how much juice is this thing running here. All right, we got 1.5 amps on that side, and then here's the other leg, 1.6 amps. So we're only drawing just barely over 3 amps of power. You know, I was really hoping, one, that this was going to help cool out the shop a little bit better, but also I was hoping it's going to help on the power bill. And man, I tell you, it really surprised me. So I will never buy another air conditioner that doesn't have the inverter in it. You know, with the inverter, it means it can run at variable speed. So even though I dropped it like 2 degrees, it's still only pulling 3 amps. I mean, that's nothing really. I mean, that's an old school light bulb. One old, you know, a couple of the incandescent light bulbs was pulling that much. So really, this is going to save a lot of money in the long run. When I actually turned this on the other day for the first time, it was a lot warmer here in the shop, and it was pulling about 2.5 amps on either side. So it was about 5 amps total, even though I guess the maximum middle draw is 9 amps, which still really isn't that much. So, you know, the install, very simple, straightforward. If I hadn't have made a couple of little mistakes on my, you know, which were no big deal, you know, it's just things that happen when you don't do this every day for a living, you know, but I could have still had this installed probably in about a half a day. Took me a lot longer because I was filming and, you know, had to redo the brackets and stuff, but, you know, that really isn't that critical. So I'm going to put, you know, this is the total of what everything cost, and I will put links in the description for all of that. I certainly appreciate you watching. And I mean, don't forget, you know, like everybody says, I know you've heard it 1,000 times, hit that like button, because it does help out, you know, these small channels. And hopefully I can start bringing you some better content, and, you know, look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, I hope everybody has a wonderful day.